And we are live. Welcome back to the Breakaway USA show. I am thrilled and honored to be with Pete Serrano, a fantastic freedom fighter from Washington State. And if you guys have ever thought, maybe Washington State is counted out, that we're just too lost to save, I'd encourage you to watch this and think again. He is the founder of the Silent Majority Foundation, which we will get into. He hated mandates so much that he actually quit his job working for the state to fight back against all the tyranny. And he is also a candidate for the Attorney General for Washington State. So Pete, welcome to the program. We're excited to have you.
Gentry, thanks a million for having me. I'm looking forward to it. As you said, it's been a freedom battle. All my life, I've always fought for what I believe to be right. But certainly over the past several years, that's really grown into kind of this volcanic explosion. So I'm excited to talk about that, the work we're doing at Silent Majority Foundation, as well as the run for Attorney General.
So tell me the story, because from what I know, you used to live in California, and then you moved up to the Tri-Cities area, Pasco. And during 2020, it got so crazy that you just said enough is enough, and you started the Silent Majority Foundation.
Yeah, that's really like the nutshell version. So to give a little more background, so I moved up 9 years ago to Pasco from Central California. I grew up in a small town called Auburn, which is right outside of Sacramento. And my wife and I, we met while I was in law school 16 years ago, and dated for a little while, got married. She stayed with me through moving to a post-law degree in Vermont, a year of practice in DC, where I sued the government, the United States government, as well as states, on Clean Water Act rulemaking. So, anyone back out here in Eastern Washington that's had issues as a farmer in particular, we had a lot of farms that would come out and say, oh, this rulemaking is really going to kill me. I can't have X number of pigs because they'll pollute the water with nitrogen or whatever. So we'd represent those types of organizations, as well as municipal governments that were saying, hey, look, your treatment's going to cost Podunk, Idaho town of 1,200 people, $22 million. We can't bond that. And so from there, we moved back to California for a few years, and then came up to Eastern Washington, like you said, Pasco. And in 2015, Yeah. So 2015, we've been here for 9 years. Two of my three kids have been born here in the Tri-Cities, and the first one was just about 2 years old when we moved here. And so it's really been a home for us. And like you said, during the pandemic, so I guess skipping back a couple years, I became elected as a city council member in Pasco. That was in 2018. So I had held this seat for about 2 years, and then the pandemic hits, and a bunch of restaurateurs, small business people, as you know, everyone knows the story. Those were the people that were really hit, the homegrown, a lot of immigrants, that were coming over here, living the American dream, small business owners, right? They made these tremendous sacrifices to do what you and I love to do, which is just work, live, and play, right? And people are hitting me up and saying, hey, look, I need you as a city councilman to stand for me. And so I tried to bring a Pasco will not shut down for COVID bill. At the time, I obviously was not in the majority of the seats. It didn't even get to like a floor vote, if you will. I kicked it around, said, here's the bill I propose. Let's talk about it. They gave me my 10 minutes and then said, okay, Mr. Serrano, you're done. I was like, well, where's our vote? And they're like, we don't need a vote. There are enough of us against this. Oh, in Pasco, conservative Washington, we're not even going to get there for our people. And so with that, I was working, like you said, for the state of Washington, worked on briefly on a recall of Jay Inslee for the abuse of powers, the tyranny that he had conducted through the vaccine mandates and I know that might get edited, the particular mandates that he had issued related to health. I remember sitting in front of the judge in Thurston County, and she said, Mr. Serrano, I can't find that Jay Inslee intentionally harmed people with this. And I'm like, well, really like outside of the realm of the recall process. And so after that, I just decided, it's time to go stand up and do something. And so we started Silent Majority Foundation just over 3 years ago. Literally one of those kitchen table kind of ideas. And
I love it.
yeah, and we've grown into 3 lawyers and several support staff, and we are fighting the government left and right on various unconstitutional issues.
Man, that's fantastic. So how has the Silent Majority been going? Like, what's the support that you've been seeing? Have you seen a lot of people in Washington rally around you, or has the sentiment been like, Washington's lost, there's no hope? Like, what's the sentiment around that?
I think, and obviously at the risk of being in like those echo chambers where people love it. I mean, we are very well received. When I announced my race for Attorney General, I took a lot of crap from the local newspaper because, anti-COVID, anti-gun lawyer, and this is again in conservative Pasco, but then I travel the state either with Silent Majority Foundation or as candidate for Attorney General. And people are like, please, no matter what happens to you, make sure Silent Majority Foundation is funded and sustained. And I said, look, I'm not leaving that. If when I'm elected Attorney General, I'll move on to a different position, but I've intentionally built a very competent, very qualified staff that will operate, to protect right now we've got 4 firearms cases. We still have 4 doctors we're representing who are being told by the Washington Medical Commission they couldn't advocate for ivermectin. That's probably going to get edited too, but so be it. It's the truth. We got to speak our truth, right? We're representing people who are still fired at Peace Health. They were on administrative leave. They remain on administrative leave without pay, meaning they're not fired and they're not working. It's like, Dante's 7 circles of hell, or they're in one of those purgatory statuses where they can't progress and they can't regress. So they can't go back to work and they can't collect unemployment. And they're still trying to figure out what to do, even though the mandate from Peace Health was lifted. So yeah, I mean, the fights are real. They are very well supported. We've grown, like I said, from my kitchen table to I'm actually sitting in a real office here, right? Which is Silent Majority Foundation's office. So we're very blessed. It's been a phenomenal journey, and I'm excited to see what our next phase in 2024 and in the future holds.
So you decided to run for Attorney General. Tell me about that, because I feel like that's a big undertaking, especially in this like deep blue state of Washington. Like, when was the last time we had a Republican or a conservative as an Attorney General?
Yeah, we had Rob McKenna in 2012, and he was great. And a lot of people still remember, his willingness to stand against the government, his willingness to do what was right for the people of Washington, and for me, when I explored it, I fielded some calls from some folks in various political circles, and they said, hey, look, here's our list of candidates, you're in the top 3. And as we watched the last elections, local elections unfold, some of the folks that were on that list said, hey, I'm going to veer over here, or I'm not interested in running, or whatever the case was. And so it kind of got down to me and just really 1 or 2 other folks. And we sat down, we talked, said, okay, what's the interest? What's the availability? Who wants to do this? And I said, you know what, I'm ready to do this. I think through Silent Majority Foundation, I'm at least known within certain circles on the east side and on the west side, south and north. And there's a real opportunity to get the message out of someone who's been fighting in the courts against the Attorney General's office, against the abuse of powers from the governor, from the AG, from the legislature, day in, day out, and can bring this like real gritty, truth to it. And that's really what spurred me. Was I looked at how the Attorney General's approach, and there's some great folks in that office that really do. I met some phenomenal attorneys that, when I'm there, I hope they don't quit. I've met some other ones that probably are, they see my name on the ballot and it's like, oh, this guy better not get elected. And in November, when I am, they'll have a decision to make, and that's fine. I don't expect everyone to ideologically agree with me, but I've been in the court with these folks, and I can tell you this: one of the most disgusting things I've seen from Bob Ferguson is his approach. It's about his record. He's like trying to be Nolan Ryan or, one of these guys of most strikeouts ever, right? We're 29-0 on the health issues or the gun issues or whatever the case is. And it's about what he's doing that so-called protects us, but it's not about us. It's about the way he talks about it. And this isn't something I'm making up. Just, anyone search how he's done his pressers, how he's done the other comms. It's about we're winning. Well, what are you winning, Bob? You're not winning my rights. And so that's really what pushed me into, look, we need someone who's going to stand for you and me, Gentry. And not just because you and I are aligned politically, but because the people of Washington deserve their tax dollars to go to fight for them, not to fight them.
Right.
And that's really what I've seen that pushed me into, okay, this is a story that's worth telling on a campaign trail statewide. People are going to disagree with me. That's fine. It's a political battle. I get it. But again, there's a truth that lies out there that there's somebody, me, who's willing to stand for people, even those I disagree with.
So in my mind, the biggest issue right now facing people of Washington state and really most states, to be honest, is the crime, right? We don't have people getting prosecuted, right? I saw some stories from 2020 and 2021 where these criminals were getting released like the next day, and they were repeat offenders, right? There was a documentary like Seattle Has Fallen or Washington Has Fallen. I can't remember what exactly it was, but I was shocked. These repeat offenders who are typically homeless and hooked on drugs and all this kind of stuff, like the police were doing their job, but then the prosecutors, they were just like saying, oh, like, well, we'll just drop it. We'll forget the paperwork, or we'll, smudge the ink somewhere so these guys can get back out on the street. Like, is that a result of Bob Ferguson, or is that like at a city level, or like, I guess my question is, what are you going to be doing differently?
Yeah, so that's a multi-layered approach, and I can talk through each one of those layers. One, part of it's the governor, right? And we have two phenomenal Republican candidates that have experience that could really, there's the old mantra, anyone better than Bob or Jay. but realistically, two phenomenal qualified candidates in both Dave Reichert and Semi Bird. And here's what the governor can do. The governor has authority to direct the prosecution of certain crimes as well as other elements on behalf of the state to the attorney general. So you imagine if I'm in there with either Mr. Reichert or Mr. Bird, we sit down that first, 45 days between November and January 1 of 25 and say, what's your plan? What do you need from my office as the attorney general to make you successful as governor to enforce the laws? Okay, well, here are the 5 issues that I ran on, and here are the promises that I made. Here's what I want to keep. Okay, great. We've got 1.5 of those. Let's overlap. You send out an edict and direct my office to do XYZ, prosecute, make this a priority, fund it, whatever the case is. So that's level one, is the governor. The second level is the attorney general himself. And, again, when our attorney general is hyper focused on political point winning, as opposed to standing for the citizens of Washington, he has the opportunity to not only prosecute crimes with the United States Attorney's Office, so, those appointed from the President of the United States, but he can also go in and on request, and when a prosecutor of a county is failing to do their duty, the attorney general can step in and say, I need to do your job. So, imagine King County, Seattle's dying, right? Imagine King County prosecutor who's just turning that blind eye, or as you said, smudging the ink, or like whatever the case is that's happening there. And the attorney general says, hey, I have the resources to actually step in. Do you want to do your job, or do you want me to do it? And I'll bring my specialist force. We'll do it. And you can sue us if you want. Go ahead. But by statute, I have certain authorities, and this is one of those. And so that's level 2 of what I personally would do, is just come in and say, hey, look, no screwing around. The people of Washington voted me in because they're sick of what you're not doing. We need somebody, a champion of the people, a Washington first person who's willing to stand for us. And I'm that guy. And now I'm here in your office, Mr. and Mrs. Prosecutor, and we're going to throw down and start doing your job, or you can do it yourself. The third level is, again, at that prosecutor level, they can request assistance. I've talked with folks here in Tri-Cities. I know both prosecutors. And I was talking with one the other day, and he said, look, man, we've requested assistance, and the AG's office is either slow or non-responsive. Well, if they're saying, hey, look, there's an internal affairs investigation that I need to check because there was a shooting or whatever the case was, and I need the AG's office to step in as that buffer between me and my local law enforcement, but the AG's office is either going crickets or just feet dragging, that's not helpful to the local communities. And so, upon request of the prosecutors, I'm happy to make sure our team is there to jump in. And then it's just also the general education of people, of letting people know, hey, look, you've got someone out here that's your champion, that's going to keep you safe. Obviously, I won't be out there policing the streets. And as much as I'd like to be Superman, I don't have a cape. I am here to make sure that Washington is safer and better.
So thanks for breaking that down, because I'm sure that'll be it was really helpful for me. I'm sure it'll be helpful for other people. But I mean, it doesn't sound like anybody is doing any of those things that you described, right? Or they're asleep at the wheel. So my question is, what has Bob Ferguson been doing for all this time? What are these prosecutors that aren't doing their job doing? And why aren't they helping people that need the help? It seems like Bob Ferguson has just been asleep at the wheel or intentionally terrible because like, and we're paying him to do it. We're paying taxes to help him destroy Washington State by doing nothing. Most of the time, I love it when politicians do nothing, right? Because that means that no new laws are passed, blah, blah, blah. But we're getting into a state where like people are leaving Seattle in droves, and they're not just going to Eastern Washington. They're going to Idaho, they're going to Montana, they're going to Texas, they're going to Florida. People are leaving the state like crazy. Is Bob Ferguson doing anything?
Not the right thing, let's put it that way. So, when it comes to what he's doing, I will tell you this. I got to give kudos to their office on a couple things. There are a few things that when they don't take a political stance, they do very competently. When it's true Consumer Protection Act work, where they're actually looking out for the consumer, that work is great. Because there are bad actors, lemon laws on vehicles, the robo and spam calls, some of that stuff is great. Now, it's become hyper politicized where, for example, with Silent Majority Foundation, we're representing Gators Gun down in Cowlitz County. For those of you who aren't in Washington, that's a fairly remote county in southwestern, kind of central western Washington. I think it's like 8,000 people, kind of a log mill type place, or used to be. And, Gators Guns, allegedly sold these prohibited large capacity magazines, which is anything larger than 10 rounds. And the state came after them, and the state is using the Consumer Protection Act saying, hey, you violated the consumer protection by selling an illegal magazine. That's their allegation. Now, this has up to a $7,500 per fine or per sale or per magazine violation, right? So you can imagine how those could aggregate. And to me, that's not what the Consumer Protection Act is for. Look, if I go in there and I buy one, knowing that Senate Bill 5078 is what it was called, was passed, banning the sales of these magazines, I'm not buying a defective product. I'm not violating your rights, Gentry, or the listeners' rights. I'm purchasing a good that I have selected to purchase. And so to use the Consumer Protection Act as this like both shield and sword for the state, that is really an improper, it's an abuse of authority in my position. So again, circling back, I'll give kudos where they're due. When the right type of case is before them, when they're looking at someone who's maliciously, ripping you or I off, or the consumer, or stealing our data, and these are cases that may be a little more sparse than they used to be, they're great on that, but they're absolutely overstepping their authority. I know Bob Ferguson has taken a lot of hell for the chicken and tuna checks. Now, that was a twofold issue. One was the way it rolled out of like this love letter from Bob was, came with these checks. And that was a Consumer Protection Act case. Now, what people don't know, I don't believe, is the background of that is he jumped on after the Department of Justice in California had actually gotten criminal charges against these actors. So it's like, hey, man, your homework's great. Can I borrow it?
Mm-hmm.
Just to make it clear, like, so Department of Justice prosecutes a couple of these CEOs of these tuna and chicken conglomerates for price fixing. They actually get, not only damages, but they actually get prison time for one or two of them. And shortly thereafter, Ferguson's office says, oh, hey, well, I was successful in California. Let me just, cut and paste. Let me slide it over, and we're going to protect the people of Washington. Now, I appreciate that they did that, but the way then that it rolled out with the love letters of, dear purchaser, right? Hashtag Bob Ferguson for governor is what it felt like. And then the way he rolled it out with not having the right people, dead people getting checks, right? And then blaming it on his vendor, that was his problem. But again, the impetus of that case was like someone had already done it successfully, so he just borrowed the homework. And again, that kudos for standing for the people of Washington, but how did that help us?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's the question that I have for him is, Bob, how are you helping me? How are you not just striking political points by suing Idaho for their transgender bathroom issues or their abortion decisions?
Mm-hmm.
And if you're suing Idaho to be more like Washington, why are we 50 several independent states, not just one great union? I mean,
Right.
obviously we are one republic, one union, but the several states have differences. And to your point, people move to Idaho, they move to Florida, they move to Tennessee, they move different places because ideologically, maybe Washington has left them. And I think part of that is what we're seeing politically at the helm, whether it's the Attorney General's office or the governor.
Mm-hmm. So you're not running against Bob Ferguson, but Bob Ferguson is running for governor. And I shudder to think what that would look like because he's been terrible at his current job. And I don't think that he will do much better as governor. In fact, I think he might be even worse than Jay Inslee, who, by the way, just for everyone's edification, Jay Inslee is like the little sister that just copies everyone. Like, and even some cases we go first, right? With the like kidnapping children law that got passed earlier this year. For, if you don't affirm your kid, then the government can come in and basically kidnap your kid, which is unbelievable. But Washington State was the first state that did that. And then other states went and copied and followed. So we're like the little brother or the little sister that likes to go either first or second on a lot of these like woke issues. And it's not really a battle that I want to win, but I think Washington might be one of the most woke places in the US. Anyway, that was a long segment into my question. Who's your opponent and how bad is he?
Yeah. So before you get there, I feel like California, Washington, and Oregon are the race to be the Titanic, right? Let's not look for the iceberg and see what we hit. And then the bottom, shockingly, we're at the bottom, the ocean floor. But yeah, so I'm running against two Democrats. I'm the only Republican in the race. And the two Democrats are Senator Monka Dhingra. Now, Senator Monka Dhingra was part of one of the sponsors of that bill you mentioned, Senate Bill 5599, the one where the state can come in if you're not affirming your kid can run away, and then notification happens like 48 or 72 hours later. It's problematic. It destroys the family. She's also one of the prime sponsors for a lot of these firearms bills. And probably most egregiously, she's the chair of the Senate, I believe it's Judiciary and Law Committee. And that's critical because we have this thing called police pursuit. We used to be afraid if we were speeding that the police would pursue us, stop us, give us tickets, and cite us. Criminals used to be afraid that if they committed a crime, the police would do the same to them. Thanks to Senator Dhingra, as the chair of that subcommittee, she was unwilling to negotiate police pursuit last year. So what we're left with are the remnants of this terrible bill that at one point late in session, there was bipartisan effort to modify it to allow police to pursue in more open-ended cases, we could say, or with less data and information, rather than having what's called probable cause, reasonable suspicion, which was just a lower standard of evidentiary standard. And Senator Dhingra decided not, as the chair, to discuss it. Now, ironically, and maybe not ironically, she's put some time in at King County Prosecutor's Office. So I think that really tells you, Gentry and crowd, that tips your hand of, part of the problem that's systemic in Seattle and King County is people like that who don't want to fix our state are elected as our senator, and she was or allegedly is employed part-time in that office. So that's one of my two opponents. The other one's a gentleman named Nick Brown. He is former general counsel, meaning lead attorney to Jay Inslee. After he did a stint there, Joe Biden appointed him as U.S. attorney for Western District of Washington. And after about 1.5 to 2 years there, he went back to private practice when he decided to run for this office. Yeah. He is, the probably his most well-known fact is he was on Survivor one of the very early seasons.
Oh, that's a fun little fact.
Yeah, it is.
I wonder how much he'll bring that up on the campaign trail. I'm a survivor.
Exactly. Of what, sir? Cancer or just the show? So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I will tell you this. I think I'm over target because as soon as I announced, literally within, I think, 48 hours, Mr. Brown's messaging was against me, not her, which is interesting because he's got to win a primary against her. I mean, with me being the only Republican, statistically, I should make it through the primary. Now, that doesn't mean it's an easy target, right? It's just, you're going to have two Democrats jockeying for 50 to 56% of the vote and me jockeying for the rest. And then a couple of folks who may not really have real interest in running. And so it's interesting that his messaging turned towards me of Mr. Serrano can't get elected because he opposes common sense gun laws, blah, 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 blah. So it is interesting. It really intrigued me when I saw that. I said, oh, wow, this is really, they know who I am and they're targeting me instead of each other.
And you really only announced about a month ago.
I did. First of the year I announced, and the campaign's been going well. We're moderately well funded. I'd like to be a lot stronger position so that I can help get some of that name ID out, especially in King, Thurston, Pierce, and Snohomish County. Again, we do have a really strong following from Silent Majority Foundation in Snohomish County. I've built great relationships with Pierce County folks. In fact, the Pierce GOP was the first to endorse me. I'm very proud of that. And that's, as you know, that's a very big county. It's a critical county. And so through those more swing counties or bluer counties, I've got to put in the effort to really get that name ID across the aisle on both sides.
Because really what you're fighting for is the rights of every single person in Washington. You're not just fighting for one side. You might have like an R next to your name, right? But there's this sense of almost despair that I think a lot of people on the left have because their party is failing them, right? Their party is essentially trying to make it so hard to live. I know that you don't have a lot to do with taxes, but taxes are being raised. It's getting harder and harder to live. crime is through the roof, and Democrats really have been in control for a long time. I know that you said that Rob McKenna was Attorney General for a little bit, but probably before that, it was a lot of Democrats and a lot of people who have this like utopia of progression. And I think the question that a lot of liberals, especially in Washington State, have to ask themselves is, what are they progressing to? Because it seems like what they're progressing to isn't conducive for you. It might be conducive for them, right? At the top of their ivory tower, getting all these backroom deals and, you know, really not working for all this money. And they're charging you to destroy their own state in the form of taxes. So I guess my encouragement to a lot of people on the left would be to really think, like, don't just see the R next to someone's name and just assume a lot of things, because my assumption is that Democrats are destroying. It's not Republicans that are destroying the state; it's Democrats. And so I think the way to really save Washington is to have a like not necessarily mass awakening, like everyone's going to go be a Trumper, but have a mass awakening saying what we're doing right now is not working, right? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. So my encouragement to everybody in Washington State, and really everybody across the nation who lives in a blue state or blue city, is let's try something different. How much worse can it get if we try something different? And I think that's where you come in. And I mean, I think that's why they're already attacking you like they are.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I get the same sense too. You know, again, if I wasn't over target, I wouldn't be attacked. I'd just be that right-wing Republican that doesn't matter. And they'd go at each other's throats and try to push me out in the primary and call it good. So I do think that there's a sense of turf and a sense of, oh no, this guy actually brings common sense. He brings standing for the rights of the people. You know, my wife reminds me of early on, probably 7-8 years ago, with the transgender bathrooms for kids. I wrote a comment to the state public superintendent, and it was on both sides of the coin. It was, listen, as a father of a daughter, I'm not comfortable with the boy that's saying he's a girl coming into her locker room. But equally, if my daughter were to change genders, I would feel very uncomfortable having her go into the boys' locker room. And so I was taking the stance that said, protect my kid, but also protect these trans kids from any unsafe or potential harmful status, and create a gender neutral bathroom. That always seemed to me, there was always compromise, but we'd never see that. And it's got to be pushing and pushing. And to your point, pushing from this ivory tower down. And it impacts people at the cost of the gas pump, the grocery stores, the social issues. Kids are losing their lives and harming themselves at a higher rate because of these so-called progressive and beneficial ideas. Imagine an attorney general who, instead of going and testifying for unconstitutional laws and then letting them slide and defending them, said, no, the Constitution first, and the people of Washington are equally yoked with the Constitution. I'm going to stand for you, and I'm going to stand for your rights, even when I disagree with you. And that's what I'm going to bring to this office. And I think, to your point, it's an opportunity for awakening of the people. And what's the absolute worst? They try it and don't like it. You know, there's a 4-year term. There's a recall option if I really violate my oath of office, which I won't. There are opportunities to get rid of me. Please, like, not really, but, you know, after a short-lived duration, I can be gone.
Yeah.
And the question I would like to ask some of those folks is, how do you think I'm going to make your life worse? I won't.
Yeah. Because you're like the talking points and the fight that you've shown with the Silent Majority Foundation is, do you want people to have more freedom?
Absolutely. I mean,
right?
The Constitution is there to protect us from government overreach.
Mm-hmm.
That is a compact between the people and the government.
Yeah.
It's an agreement. And when the government violates that, somebody's got to hold it accountable. And
Mhm.
I'll keep doing it through Silent Majority Foundation. I'm proud of the work we're doing. We are making marks. We are moving the needle. We are pushing back. We're seeing some legislation gets tweaked or modified or dropped. We're seeing things are getting, declared illegal. But imagine if I had the resources of a 1,200 person staff and $700 million a year that Bob Ferguson presently has, and the future AG will inherit. I
Mhm.
mean, I've made this joke. I could literally cut the budget and take a nap for 4 years and you'd be better off. And that is a sickening statement because that means almost $1 billion of our tax money is being wasted by that office to fight against us.
Wait, say that one more time.
Okay. The AG's office, and this is the budget statement they had this year. The request, no, that was what was fulfilled in 23. I think the request for 24 was increased. 1,200 staff, either 1,200 attorneys or 1,200 staff. So that I don't recall if that's attorneys and support staff or just attorneys, but let's assume that's entire staff. But $700 million. This is the largest law firm in the state of Washington. And if you aggregate it, it's probably a top 7 to 9 in the country. One of the largest law firms in the United States of America is our Attorney General's office. Could you imagine what that office would do if it was working for the people instead of its political whims?
Oh my gosh. And so
Yeah.
you said that
Yeah.
you could cut the budget, take a nap for 4 years, and we'd all be better off.
Well, I mean, that's my position. I
Yeah.
mean, think about it this way. You asked me the question. I've not been able to effectively answer it. What does Bob Ferguson do well? And the answer really is very few things that are beneficial to you and I. And not just because we're on the different end of the spectrum politically. I don't think he's serving the people of Washington well. And I think his office, I think there are absolutely people in that office that care.
Mhm.
But I also think they're presently a minority. And even if they're a majority, they still have a tyrant of a boss that wants things his way. And he
Mhm.
will pout and shout about his record until he gets his way.
Mm.
I've seen this.
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's what we're up against when we fight from Silent Majority as a nonprofit standpoint of 3 attorneys and 5 staff. That's what we're up against. But
Mhm.
imagine if I took that office over, whether I cut the budget and we found a way to reuse those resources or actually use that level of resources fighting for your rights,
Mhm.
fighting against the government's desire to continually infringe those rights.
Mm.
It'd be
That
it'd be a crazy, crazy world that we'd wake up to.
that's insane that they have $700 million budget. Was that last year? That
Yeah,
was
that
the
was
budget?
I believe in 23.
So they have $700 million and they have all this resources, all this staff to go clean up the streets, prosecute crime, and they are not doing that.
There are a lot of things that could be done with that money that aren't being done.
Oh my gosh. That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah.
Insane.
And really that's at the Attorney General's discretion of how that money is used. I mean, obviously not entirely. Some of it's, hey, you're going to budget for this and that, and obviously some are overhead costs, whatever.
Mhm.
But the bottom line is it's not like some bean counters telling him you can't go to Seattle to help. The statute says, look, when the prosecutor fails to do his or her duty, you can intervene. When the prosecutor requests, you can come in and intervene. Could you imagine, again, if just those resources were used to help clean things up, even a portion, $7 million, right? Like a 1/100th of that was used to help actually move King County along. And I can tell you this, I've talked with King County council members present and past who are like, yeah, we would love the help. We would love the help. They've got a great city of Seattle attorney, a lady named Ann Davidson.
Mhm.
She is really working. Her office has submitted briefs on the homelessness issue to the U.S. Supreme Court. She's actually working on there's a less progressive. I don't know if that's that's not a huge compliment, but it's a less left tendency that got elected in November. And I think she sees the writing on the wall that she has this great window of opportunity to help clean up Seattle. Imagine if I went up there and said, Miss Davidson, I'm the new Attorney General. What can I do for you? How can I help you? Where's your office missing? You're clearly starting the end roads. How can I get you to the next level?
Mm-hmm.
And if she said, well, the prosecutor in King County isn't doing anything, it's like, great, let's hold hands, walk over to his or her office and just jump ship and say, we're here to fix what you're not doing. How do you want to do this?
Oh my gosh.
That's just one county out of 39.
City of Seattle, listen to what he is saying. Seriously. Listen to what he's saying. He's not trying to restrict everyone's rights. He's just trying to clean up the streets and help the city of Seattle and probably the city of Tacoma and Everett and all these major cities that are just going downhill.
Yeah, I mean, look, as a councilman in Pasco, I've been fighting to make sure that our police and our judicial system is well funded,
mm-hmm.
and our fire, of course, because we are seeing the remnants come from north and south, and that are taking over our streets. I don't want my kids to walk through that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, there's a tremendous amount of self-interest here of making sure my kids are safe. And that's really what I want. Is I want my kids, look, it's not going to be love and rainbows and happiness. I get that.
Right.
But it's not stepping over somebody's feces or their needles or their tinfoil or some crap like that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to go away overnight, but we can do things to at least incrementally, if not exponentially, improve the situation.
Well, I think things could potentially get better overnight. San Francisco proved that, right? They literally proved that you can clean up a city over the weekend or in a week, right? I mean, if you can deliver that, if you can just say, see San Francisco, I'm going to do the same thing in Seattle, you'd win. Yeah. You'd win.
Well, and that's why part of what we're doing now, me and my team, is we're meeting with folks in King County, in Seattle. And I'm willing to meet across the aisle because, look, homelessness, drugs, crime, those are nonpartisan issues.
Mm-hmm.
The safety of, selfishly, my children and my wife are nonpartisan issues.
Mm-hmm.
You protect me and mine, you and yours are protected, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when I look at that, it shouldn't be hard to get meetings, and sadly it is, with some of these folks that are on the opposite end of the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And sadly, I don't think some of these folks want good ideas to be brought to them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that said, there are certain authorities that the Attorney General has where I could insert myself.
Yeah.
That I can't do even as a nonprofit. Sure, I can sue as a nonprofit, but we're much smaller and I don't have that authority to say at the law.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Man, I'm really happy that you're running because and I'm really happy that you see the potential that Washington has, because there's a lot of people, especially in 2020, that said, screw it. They threw the towel in. It's getting really bad. And now in 24, it's arguably worse. Right. But I really appreciate that there's people like you who have stuck their flag in the ground. They drew a line in the sand and said, I'm staying. I'm going to fight because Washington is worth fighting for. It's one of the most beautiful states in the country. I've been all over, right? I've been all over. I do not think you can beat a summer in Seattle. I don't think you can. I've been to Hawaii. I've been to Florida. I've been to just California. I don't think you can beat it. It is so beautiful here. And whenever I go travel to these conservative conferences, they're always like, oh, Seattle, it's like, how's it going up there? And blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, guys, it's such a pretty state. It's worth fighting for. There's so much opportunity here if we could just clean up the streets, get taxes under control. I mean, can you imagine if we prosecuted criminals and if we lowered taxes? This place would be unbelievable. People would deal with the rain again.
Yeah, well, exactly. And you know, I mean, I think of the times that I've flown into Seattle and you loop over Rainier and then you see all the lakes and you see you know, depending on where you're coming from, you may have come in from the ocean and just it is gorgeous. And what sucks though is every time I drive up there, I on I-5, I hit that certain point. I think it's you're passing like through, or when you're going on 90 through Bellevue, and then you start to cut in through 5, and it's just like the
Yeah.
tents and the tents and the tents and the tarps and the tents and the shopping carts, and it's like this city has so much potential. Potential. You're passing T-Mobile Field and the water's right there. You see the wharf and the piers and all this stuff, and it's so cool. And you just want to hang out, and then you see what it is, and it's like, man, if we could clean up the ground, the aerial's gorgeous. We got to clean up the ground, and I think there's a ripe opportunity. You know, you mentioned 2020, pundits predicted, and that's about all I can say about 2020. There was supposed to be a red wave based on aggregated data and historical data. But 24, I believe, Gentry, is different because it has gotten worse. It's progressed or regressed into a situation where people are fed up with costs and they're fed up with crime. And certainly, as Attorney General, I can help. To your point, I'm not a tax guy. That's, you know, unless it's unconstitutional, say, hey, don't pass this, I won't defend it. And that certainly is an option. You know, legislature makes bad laws, like, oh, well, we're going to just let somebody sue on this, and maybe we'll actually intervene on behalf of the people of Washington. That's novel. Like, oh, hey, no, the people of Washington don't want this. Okay, well, then let's sue the state. The other option too is, again, jumping in and helping these prosecutors to do their job, whether it's with a little bit of force as available by law, or with an offer. Because I think there are some prosecutors who are really trying their best and they just don't have resources. And again, if I've got that kind of money coming out of my ears, maybe I don't waste it on some other, you know, unnecessary administrative law stuff. You know, that fourth branch of government that's subversive of the administrative agencies. So there is a lot that can be done. And I'm extremely hopeful that, you know, if I can be elected to this office, I can make a difference. I wholeheartedly believe that. Otherwise, I would have, in those early days, in talking with my colleagues, said, "No, here the buck passes to you." I really believe I can make a difference. And the 3 years I've spent with Silent Majority Foundation fighting in the courts on a day-to-day basis with the Attorney General's office has exposed me to kind of the inside ball. And I think it's extremely valuable. And watching the way the legislature, the governor, the Attorney General all kind of culminate with the courts, it really helps me understand what the lay of the land is. I'm not some guy outside looking in. You know, when I was working for the state of Washington, even though I was working for the state, I was on that outside looking in. I was really in this kind of narrow environmental energy law stuff, which was awesome. I loved it. We were going to permit small modular reactors, new nuclear technology to the Tri-Cities. But then obviously things changed. And over the past 3 years, I've had the fortune and opportunity and the blessing to represent the people of Washington from a small kind of David versus Goliath approach. And imagine if I actually had the Goliath on my side, but didn't treat it, you know, as historically Goliaths have.
Right. Well, I think you've got the 5 stones in your pouch, and you're ready to go to war. And I think that Goliath is actually a pretty good analogy for what's happening, because, you know, there's a lot of people that think Goliath had giantism, and he just didn't know what was going on. He was just big and intimidating. Kind of sounds like Jay Inslee, kind of sounds like Bob Ferguson. So maybe that's like the perfect analogy.
It might be, but as long as we end up and we're able to slay it, and not literally, you know, for anyone that wants to take shots at me.
Oh my God. Yeah. We're qualified. We're not calling for violence.
Yes. Right. But we are calling for activation at the ballot box.
Yep. Well, Pete, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to throw some websites up here on the screen. Where can people follow you and on social media? Do you have an email list? Like, what's the best way to get in contact with you and help support you?
So the first link is direct to fundraising. So anyone that wants to donate to the AG campaign can go there. There are all the qualifiers of what you have to fill out. It's annoying, but that's lovely, the state of Washington. So anyone that's willing to donate, every dollar counts. It helps me reach more voters, whether it's via text, via email, like you said, Gentry, or coming on to shows like this. The second link is direct for anyone that wants a tax write-off. They can donate to Silent Majority Foundation because we are a 501c3 nonprofit organization. And we're still going to defend your constitutional rights, even when I'm doing so as your Attorney General. Both Silent Majority Foundation and my campaign have X, we have Facebook, and we have Instagram. For the campaign, it's just Serrano, Serrano 4AG, and that's FORAG. So you can find me on socials there, as well as Serrano4AG.com is my website. And then Silent Majority Foundation, again, that link directly, smfjb.org, will take you to us. And then we do have Instagram, X, and Facebook presences. So don't ever hesitate. Every once in a while, we do a podcast with me and one of our other directors, a guy named Rob Waits. He's phenomenal. Primarily, our focus there is to just fill people in on the work. We have a pretty robust Substack that goes out when we do new stuff, but we don't catch everything. And so Rob and I try to fill the gaps with conversations like this. So yeah, anyone that's willing to support, and then if they're willing to support, whether it's volunteering for the campaign, there's a contact button on the Serrano4AG.com. And certainly don't hesitate to send me messages, whether it's Instagram, X, or Facebook. But yeah, anything we can do to help raise awareness of the campaign, Silent Majority Foundation. Again, donations to either or both would be phenomenal.
Perfect. Well, Pete, thank you so much for joining. I'm really excited about your campaign, and we'll probably have you on in the future to get an update. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, I'd love to come back. I mean, especially, summertime, and then August is going to be primaries. When I get through that, we'll talk about what the last 3 months of the year look like and the craziness of running in the generals. And I'm sure at that point, then we'll finally have debates and all the fun stuff that we'll have the really good clips for.
Perfect.
Hashtag Survivor.
We got the viral juice there. That's amazing. Well, everybody, thank you for watching this episode of Breakaway USA. My name's Gentry. This is Pete Serrano. Definitely go donate if you want to volunteer. Please do. I mean, the state of Washington, I think, hinges on this race and the governor's race. So donate. Donate your time, donate your money, talk to people about this. Say, hey, there's a sane guy running for Attorney General, and he is going to clean up the streets. He's going to cut the budgets. I mean, tell people about Pete. Please tell people about Pete. If you're watching this from outside of Washington State, text somebody this episode, because this is the kind of content that we need to revive hope in Washington. So don't forget to follow me, Gentry Jeevers, on all platforms, breakaway_USA. And then everything that Pete just said about the Silent Majority Foundation. And you said Serrano for AG?
Yep.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
Perfect. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Until next time.
Thanks.